Okay, well, looks like most of you have signed up to do the recording. I know this was a difficult time for a lot of people, and a lot of us were just at the Greater Homeschool Conference up in Ontario, California. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, go through the material. And tonight's topic is what is the value of working with a college planner? What in the world can we do for your family? How do we pick one? When would you hire one? So I'm going to go through and answer this question, because when we moms and dads were getting ready for college, it was pretty straightforward, and we picked 3 or 4 schools and put in some applications and took the tests, and preparation for the test, as I well recall, was get a good night's sleep the night before and don't forget your calculator and your pencils. It was very, very simple compared to what our high school students are working through and dealing with these days. The competition has been pretty insane. Kids are applying, some of them to 20 colleges. So we've got a lot going on. And then if I know that some of you homeschool, and so on top of it, you're trying to figure out, how do I report my students' grades? How's anybody going to believe the work that they've done? How do I document that? There's a lot of other complexities that come into it. But in a lot of ways, we're actually on the same footing as anyone else that's not from the local area at any college or university, because they don't know your student. So we'll get into what a college planner is, what we do, the kind of value that we bring to families, and that will help you make much more informed decisions as you move forward through the high school years. A little introduction, a little bit about myself. Some call me America's Catholic College Planning Specialist because I have a master's degree in Catholic theology, and that's the perspective that I use. Every young person, every old person, everybody is here for a reason, has certain gifts and talents. And so my focus is very much holistic around the student and helping them sort out who they are and what's the right path for them, and what's the right situation educationally for them. A couple of years ago, I was able to produce the Ultimate Guide to Top Quality College Planning, which is available on Amazon. And I speak for NCAG and WACAC, Homeschool Connection. So I speak both to my peers, fellow professional college planners, as well as to homeschoolers and other parents. I've been in this work since 2004. I'm based in San Diego, and I have worked with families from Australia to Germany and all across the United States. The common denominator being that the students are targeting American schools. And I do kind of swing both ways on the academic spectrum. I do have a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering and management science from Northwestern University, and a master's degree in Catholic theology from Franciscan University of Steubenville. So I've done the hard tech fields, and I've also done the humanities. Additionally, I have worked with a number of students in musical theater. One of my daughters is an artist, so I've had to deal with auditions and portfolios and other complexities to the application process. I've been a homeschool mom for 17 years at this point, since 1998, when I started with my oldest. I have 6 children, and I have worked with them creating my own curriculum, using other people's, in conjunction with charter schools. There were episodes when various of them were in public school. So I've run the gamut as far as what made sense for their education, and I've dealt with clients and students across the country who are completely on the spectrum, from private, high-priced private schools to completely independent homeschoolers, and everything in between. So that's a little bit about me. So tonight we're going to talk about what difference can getting help make. Let me give you some examples and show you some of the difference working with a planner makes, because sometimes we think that our students are doing a good job in the research, and they just don't realize. And then what sort of families benefit most from help based on research, not just my opinion. And then who can provide assistance, because there's a number of categories of professionals that we might consider. And then how much will it cost? I think that's key to share, because we're not all made out of money, and the costs for college have, wow, they just exploded. They have increased at such a disproportionate rate to everything else. So everything has gone up, incomes and other prices, but college is just way out of whack with everything else. So what's our benefit for working with somebody, and how much is that going to cost us now, to see if we can leverage that and make that work better for our family? All right, so what difference can getting help make? This is an example. Let me walk you through this in case you've never seen something like this. So on the left, there's University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana and Northwestern University. Now, I already said I went to Northwestern undergrad. I grew up in the Chicago area, and U of I and Northwestern are rival schools. Obviously, University of Illinois is a public university. And so we'll stick with the orange column for a minute. The COA means the cost of attendance. That's the complete cost for 1 year of college. And that includes your tuition and your room and board and your books and fees and some personal money. And it's an official number that the financial aid office uses. Okay? And then EFC is the expected family contribution. And that's going to vary from family to family, and even from child to child within a family. It's calculated through using the FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid. There are also additional forms that can come up with an EFC. But the federal one is the FAFSA. And they go through the formula, and they assess a certain portion of the parent's income and assets and the student's income and assets, which is why it can vary for 2 students in the same family. They do divide the parent contribution between the number of students who are in college, but that's where that number comes from. And then need is just the difference. That's the financial need. So in our sample family here, their EFC is $5,000. A year of school is 29.5, so they need $24,568. So the financial aid office is going to look at that amount, okay? And then historically, University of Illinois does very well for a public university, and they meet 66% of need. So that means that on average, 1/3 of your need is not met. So you're just going to add that to your EFC. It's what you're going to have to pay. And then of the need that they do meet, 2/3 of that is in we call gift aid. And gift aid is scholarships and grant money that you don't have to pay back. And that can come from the Alumni Association or the department or the college at the university or financial aid office. It's somehow going to come from the university. And then a third of it, historically from the University of Illinois, has come in what's called self-help. Self-help is a category used to describe both loans and work study. And when I work with families, I tell them to just consider it loans. If you get work study, that's fabulous, and it lowers the amount of loans. But kind of always, when you're calculating, you always want to calculate worst case, because if you can handle that and things turn out better, then that's no problem. So their out-of-pocket cost is going to be $13,353. Now that's their EFC plus their unmet need. Okay, and then the true cost when you add back in the loans, the self-help, is $18,684. Okay, and we won't need to go so long to go through Northwestern, but their cost is more than twice as much, right? $63,393. Same family with an EFC of $5,000, and so they need $58,000. And a lot of families would stop right there, saying, "There's no way in the world we could possibly go to this school," and they'll just take it off the list. But Northwestern, like a number of top-tier schools, is a 100% need-met school, and like a lot of them, they have a large endowment. So the gift aid proportion is 85%. The self-help is only 15%. So your out-of-pocket cost, since it's 100% need met, it is your EFC. And then when you add the loans back in, your self-help, it comes to $13,759. And the numbers stay this way, that it's cheaper to go to Northwestern until your EFC, your income and assets increase enough so that you have an EFC that's more than the cost of attendance at University of Illinois. So being able to sort that out and figure out what the historical percent need met is and what your likely net cost really is going to be is a huge factor. And a lot of the net cost calculators on the websites that are now legally required to be on there aren't very helpful. So the rule of thumb, if you're using a college or university's net cost calculator from their website, is if it isn't totally annoying and takes at least half an hour, maybe as much as an hour to do, you're not going to get an estimate that's worth anything. If it's a couple questions that's really easy, the number's worthless. Okay, but it just makes it harder for families. They're abiding by the law, but just barely. So let's look at another aspect of value of working with a college planner. There are regionally across the United States, with the exception of 6 or 7 of the states, tuition discount programs. So a year ago, I had a California student come to me, and she wanted to do an art business double major, and she was applying to an out-of-state school. And there's the Western Undergraduate Exchange that applies in her case for California residents who are going to other schools. This school was also in the West. And so the way she did the application is there on the left. It was just straightforward. She just picked her majors and just did a standard application. Happily, she was working with me and she sent it to me. But it would have cost her $39,090 times 5 years, because with this particular double major, it was going to add an extra year. And so the cost of the degree was going to be $195,000. But then I looked at it and I said, whoa, wait a minute, the way that you've selected your majors, it doesn't qualify for the WUI program. And I went and revised her application before it was submitted so that it would qualify under the WUI program, because like everything else, there's a lot of details on all this and getting it done right. And that lowered her cost over $9,000 a year. And the cost of the degree went down to $149. And so just that review saved them $46,340. It cost them $250 for the review. So that's quite a return on investment. But she just didn't know. She just thought, well, because I'm in California and it's an Arizona school, it'll all be done, and that doesn't necessarily work. So having somebody to review that and making sure everything is done properly, or even to inform you that hey, there is a program here and it could be done like this, can mean an enormous difference. So here's another student who came to me a couple of years ago. I'm calling him Joe Typical. He came with a list. Actually, his father called in a panic. Joe had 11 schools on his list. And Dad's panic, the reason he called me was he said his favorite school is over $60,000 a year. 6 of the 11 on his list are over $50,000 a year. I'm doing really well, but I really don't want to spend that kind of money if I don't have to. So are these good schools for my student? Are there options? And I looked, and 4 of the schools that the kid had picked, he didn't even have his major. They didn't have the major that he wanted to study. Because he's a high school kid. They just don't get all the details that they need to do. There were no academic safety schools. So in other words, he was a reach candidate who's just barely going to have credentials or not quite have credentials, or just kind of in the middle of the road at all 11 of his schools, which means that he might have ended up with 0 acceptances. You always want to have an academic safety school. And obviously, there was no financial safety school. The kid was definitely into bells and whistles and names and things. And that can be fine if it works, but he didn't really have the credentials to do that, and Dad didn't have the pocketbook to do that. And then he also had a special skill. He wasn't an athlete, but he had another area of expertise that he had national recognition in, actually. And he didn't even check, because he's a kid. 7 of the 11 schools on his list didn't even offer that as an option. So certainly to those 7 schools on his list, it was nothing to benefit him. There was no hook. Admissions wasn't going to go, ooh, he's really good at this, we want him. There was nothing for them to say, yeah, we really like you, and we have scholarship money for you, because often that'll happen. So he had 6 really pricey schools, some with his major and his skill, it was pretty nuts. So let's take a look. I redid the list per the father's request. I found 28 additional schools. 10 of them were under $35,000 a year. All of those 10 had scholarships for which he was a great candidate. 6 of those 10 schools met every bit of his criteria, location and all the little things that he was looking for. All 10 of them, of course, had his major and that special talent. And then of the 18 schools that were between 35 and 50,000, 14 of them also had all of his criteria. Okay, so they ended up with 20 schools meeting all of their criteria. 6 of them were under 35,000. All of them having scholarship possibilities to reduce the price even more. So and the student was at a pretty fancy school, and Dad's thinking that the counselors at school were helping, and to some extent they did, but mostly what happened was a lot of chatter, and the kids were sort of, I think, trying to outdo each other with their lists, and his list was very unrealistic. That happens easily enough. The students just don't know enough. You're asking your student to pick schools where you're going to spend $200,000. And I can't imagine any of us really asking our teenage child at 16, 17, 18 years old to do all the due diligence necessary to spend $200,000 of our money. But a lot of people do that, and they just, I don't know, somehow little magical thinking, we think it's all going to work, but they really need some guidance. Here's another area where a planner really can make a difference. So do you have any idea where 99% of the scholarship money comes from? Well, when I do this live, I ask, and very occasionally I'll get one person who guesses. And the fact is that 99% of the scholarship money comes from the colleges and universities themselves. It's not all of those Nordstrom scholarships and other scholarships that get the big name, and the Walmarts and the Coca-Colas that, wow, and they might get some publicity in the newspaper. That's not where the scholarship money is coming from, by and large. There's a bunch there, but it's not where most of it is. So I spend my time fishing where all the big fish are. And then additionally, scholarship money is considered a resource in the financial aid formula per federal law. And so that means that it increases your EFC and it reduces your financial need. As you recall from this slide with the University of Illinois and Northwestern, you file the FAFSA form and you get your EFC, and then the schools will adjust that. We are by law required to report to them any private scholarships we win. And so we need to say, hey, I got this scholarship, I got that scholarship, and they are required by law to take it out of your financial aid package, because they're not allowed to give you more than the total cost of attendance. Some schools are very kind, and if they have unmet need, they'll apply it there, and it doesn't hurt you. But an awful lot of schools, especially in these days of budget constraints, will just simply lower the amount of scholarships and grants that they're giving you. And so your net gain is 0, and their net gain is whatever the outside scholarship is you brought, and they can now free up those dollars and give it to somebody else. So I just want you to be aware. The simple rule of thumb on that is if your EFC is higher than the cost of attendance, private scholarships work fine. If it's lower, then not so much. Okay, and then on the last line there, my clients in my class of 2015 that just graduated averaged over $255,000 each in merit scholarships. That is non-need-based aid. It was completely independent of what their parents' income was, their income was. But they were awarded over $255,000 each. And that includes one of my students who actually, just because of other goals in her life and situations in her life, she actually received zero, and she's in the average. There were a couple of them that just received an enormous amount. But because I look for that and I do the college search very effectively, it makes an enormous difference in the bottom line for my clients. So that is another value of working with a college planner. And then I wanted to also talk about dual strategies, academic strategies, ways that we can save money, lower the cost. Okay, because there's ways to meet the cost, which we're talking about with increasing our eligibility for need-based aid or being at schools that are going to meet all of that and finding scholarships. That's all helping us meet the cost. These are some strategies that college planners can bring into play, sometimes us parents too, to lower the cost of college. And dual enrollment, if you haven't heard of it, it's an extremely valuable tool. And that means taking classes at a college while you're a high school student. And depending on where you're at, some states and regions will cover tuition there, and the only thing you have is the cost of books. Sometimes it's the cost of fees, which will be $15 a semester plus books. And books these days, a lot of times the kids are renting or they're cycling back and they're selling again the next term. So after you get through that first semester, then you're just trading out the book money over and over. But dual enrollment, and why does that work? Because you're going to end up with a high school diploma and 2 transcripts. You'll have your high school transcript showing all the qualifications that got you that diploma. Then you're also going to have a college transcript. And most of the universities will accept those college courses. So you apply as a freshman, and then after you're accepted, then they send your credentials over to the registrar and they give you whatever credit. So they're going to accept, and then you matriculate in as a second semester freshman or a first semester sophomore or whatever the case may be. And as you are probably aware, the local community college or even sometimes the local state colleges that are in our areas are a lot cheaper than a lot of the universities, especially for high school students, because they generally have different rates. And then the next 2 things I want to talk about are testing, ways to test out of classes. I'm trusting that everybody's heard of AP. The College Board does a really good job of publicizing their advanced placement or AP courses and exams. You do not need to take an AP course to take an AP exam. But you do need to take an AP exam in a brick and mortar school. So you'll need to coordinate, if you're an independent homeschooler, you need to coordinate with the local school so that they will let you come in and sit those exams. They are scheduled by the College Board for the first 2 weeks in May every year. And it's a rigid schedule. So everybody in the nation who's taking AP psychology, for example, is going to take it on the same day in the same afternoon or the same morning, however the schedule is. And so across the country, AP Lit's going to be, Thursday the 1st in the morning, whatever the schedule is for that year. So it's very rigid. It's the first 2 weeks in May only. Now, CLEP is also a College Board testing program, but it's one they kind of hide, and I don't really know why, and we keep asking them to change it. But if you go to the College Board website, which is collegeboard.org, and I don't know why it's not .com, because they're definitely a business, but it's collegeboard.org, you won't see a header for CLEP. You'll see for SAT, and you'll see for AP and other things, but you won't see anything for CLEP. But if you go into the little search bar and put in CLEP, which is college level examination proficiency, something like that. It's an odd acronym. It's a whole suite of tests, very parallel to the AP. I believe there are 22 of them in different fields. And just like on the AP sites, you can see the percentage of the test is on the various subjects and subdivisions within the field that they're offered. You can also search for sites to take the test. The tests are available around the year. At any month during the year, you can take the test, and they're available at many sites around the world. So just like setting up for the SAT or the ACT, you would go into the College Board and you would select, yeah, I want to do this test, and here's my zip code. Where can I go? And as opposed to high schools for CLEP, generally you will find testing centers or universities are the places you need to go to take it. And you can take it more than once. So you can take it, for example, a lot of kids will do a year course in something, and then in June they'll sit the CLEP exams. And homeschoolers will do that sometimes to validate their curriculum, but it also can turn into college credit, because just like the AP, most colleges and universities will accept it. Now, of course, every college and university has their own policy, and they might change from year to year about which classes they're going to accept for dual enrollment, and then which CLEPs and what scores are going to equivalent to what amount of courses that they're going to waive. And then AP, same thing. Some schools will accept a 3, some require a 4, some require a 5, some won't take them at all. So you need to do your due diligence from the schools, but all of those can work together or independently to save a semester or 2 or 3, which is a significant savings when you think that just the room and board around the country averages about $10,000. So just that. And then getting out sooner, of course, they can get to work sooner. Okay. Another way to save money is to be below average, which may sound a little funny, but the average time to get a bachelor's degree in the United States is over 6 years. And it has been for some time. And that's not something that they're really advertising out there. They're talking about getting people through community college and other things the politicians will address, but they're not really addressing the fact that a 4-year bachelor's degree takes 6 years. And it's worse if you start in a 2-year institution. 15% of the degree-seeking students in a community college end up with a degree within 6 years. Okay, the median time to degree is 63 months, but 85% within 60. 85% of those who start at a community college intending to transfer in 6 years will not have a degree. So that's a sobering reality. And the kids who are going need to be really assertive and make sure that the community college courses are of a caliber they need to be accepted by the universities. They can get into the transfer counselors and get everything that they need to lined up to transfer out. Additionally, one other thing to note at the bottom of this paragraph, which is this is information from the U.S. Department of Education. Kids who delay entry into college, it takes them 80 months to get through. And it's usually because they're working. Sometimes they're even married and having families, and they're having to go to school. It's a very long process. So for those of us who think, well, I worked my way through it, and so I want my kids to work their way through it because I want them to really value it, that's a very valid line of thinking, but we need to look at the reality of how much more expensive it is now and how much harder it is to work through. You just can't take a full load of classes. It's very difficult. And so we really need to do some due diligence on this to keep our kids below average, because obviously it costs both their time and ability to earn money as well as the extra costs for extra years of college. The other thing that I want to say about this whole area is an awful lot of parents are sending their kids to college and university not having any idea what they want to do. And the thought that they have, and I've heard it articulated over and over, and it just always stuns me, is, well, we'll just let them go and they'll figure it out while they're there. They can just take a smattering of classes and sort it out. And I'm sure something will catch their interest, and then they'll focus and they'll move on with that. But that often leads to extra years, because in doing a smattering of classes, that means if I choose, say I've got 6 classes in a semester, if I choose a field of any one of those, 5 of those classes are now throwaways, by and large. Or people will say, well, they could do their general eds the first couple of years and then figure it out. Well, that's not going to help them figure it out, because everybody's taking the general eds if you're doing a college that has those. And they often don't really have enough electives to sort it out. And so then they're going another year trying to figure it out, and another year trying to figure it out. And then they got to figure it out. Then they have to see what credits they have that actually count for that. So you can see where this is all going. So I personally work with all of my clients very diligently on the whole career search part first. So we have some kind of a goal, and we're not looking all over the place. We have some idea of who we are, what our gifts are, what kind of personality we have, and then we can get into a career field and a range of majors so that it's a much smaller thing. If they change majors, and they're adjacent majors, they're not going to lose time. versus what I did undergraduate was engineering, and then I went and did theology graduate school. So my whole first semester, I had to, first of all, adjust to semester because I'd never had them before. I always had trimesters or quarters. And secondly, I had to take all prerequisites because I changed fields so drastically because I was finally doing what I wanted to do. But I didn't really realize that till right before I graduated my senior year, and I wasn't going to start over then. So, but when you do a drastic field change, then you have to do prerequisites and all kinds of other things, just adds more time. Okay, another thing that a value of working with somebody is to be competitive with your peers. The Higher Education Consultants Association is a national organization of professional education consultants like myself, and they recently did a survey and showed up that 26% of top students, which they defined as over 1150 out of 1600 on the SAT, over 25 on the ACT, which really are not top students. That's your college-bound group. But 26% were using an independent education consultant. And so being competitive, you need to know that the top kids are using somebody. And so it just helps to have that professional helping you in whatever capacity, because there's a number of them. Okay, another way that's very helpful is get more information about early strategies and how to figure out your application strategy. There's a whole bunch of letters up there, and some of you are probably going, what is all that? So you have early admission 1 and 2, early decision 1 and 2, single choice early action, rolling admission, and regular decision. And it makes a difference how and when you apply. Early decision 1 and 2 have a contract in them, and you can only apply to one school, early decision, because the contract says if you get accepted at our school, if we accept you, then you will rescind all of your other applications and you will come to our school. And there's a little teeny fine print that, you know, if the money really, really doesn't work out, then you can bail, but by and large that doesn't happen. So you're making a very serious legal commitment to go to that school. Early action, there's no commitment, but it still has early deadlines, and you find out early. 1 and 2 just indicates that sometimes schools will offer multiple deadlines. So you can be the first round of early and the second round of early kids at their school. Some schools offer both early decision and early action. And then you have single choice early action, which there are some schools like Stanford that limit that you can only apply to one school early unless the other early schools are public schools. They can only, so they get into all these little fine distinctions between the different programs. And then you've got rolling decision, which kind of has a built-in early without deadlines. It just means they don't have a deadline. They're just going to take applications until they fill their class. And then regular decision, if you just see, you know, our application deadline is X date, that's regular decision. They're just offering regular. But some will offer most of these at the same time. And then you've got to deal with all 10 of your schools and who's got what and which one do we do and how does that work. And as is implied in the fact that you're applying early and you're going to that extra effort, you're demonstrating you have a significant interest in that school. Additionally, they have the development students, the athletes that are being recruited, and people like that have the school has a special interest in. They will push them to apply early, especially early decision. And so the acceptance rate is much higher in those pools, the early pools. And at a lot of schools, they fill up between 1/3 and 1/2 of the class with the early kids. So that means the regular decision kids are only having a shot at the other half of the class. So that can get a little brutal as far as admissions, what the percentage is to really get in. So figuring all that out and knowing how to do that and position yourself and which school to go early and what to do can be a nightmare, or you can get a little professional advice and have some confidence in what you're doing. So those are some of the benefits. Now, who benefits most from getting help? Again, I did engineering undergrad, so I like to do research and find data. So according to the data from both the Higher Education Consultants Association and the U.S. Department of Education, the families who benefit the most are students who are not familiar with the college options, particularly students who are going to school somewhere else maybe their parents are deployed military and they're in schools not in America, or their parents did not go to college. There's a huge number of conversations that parents can have with their students, their children, about college and things to do to prepare for college that give an advantage to those students whose parents did go to college. When the ones that your parents did not go, or they didn't go to college in America, they don't have that. So they really need help. Students interested in less common majors also benefit significantly because doing the research can be rather difficult. For example, a year and a half ago, I worked with a young lady who wanted to do a particular technical field, and it was a blended field between 2 or 3 different areas. And I did hour upon hour upon hour of research for her because every single college or university I found that had her field called it something different. So it wasn't like industrial engineering where we all know what that is and we can go look it up and do a Google search on which are the top ones, and there's whole lists of schools that have industrial engineering. With her major, literally every single school on her list called it something different. And so I was having to get into the descriptions of the majors and get very creative about how I was searching to go look for it, to go find the other schools that also had it. So that is another place where working with a professional can be very helpful because we also talk to each other. So you're not just working with your professional, but their whole network of other education consultants. And then, according to the U.S. Department of Education, students with unusual academic backgrounds. And I know a lot of the people that I work with are homeschooling, and so I'm just pointing out that we're 3% of the U.S. student body. So we have unusual academic backgrounds, and especially even in our own families, student to student, it'll be very different one to the other. So that's definitely a category that really could use some assistance and is going to benefit greatly from getting it. So let's take a few minutes, now that we've talked about some of the different services and ways to save money and make the process much smoother. We've also talked about who can benefit. Let's talk about who the professionals are who can help, okay? So what a lot of people start to think about is, well, let me ask the financial aid office because that's what they do, right? But we have to remember that their job is to get your child to be at their school, and they want you to pay as much as possible for it, which is exactly opposite of your question, because your question is, how do we get the most help? And their goal is to give you the least help. And so it can be very difficult. There are a few schools that are exceptions. I've seen some of the very staunchly Catholic and conservatively Christian schools. Financial aid offices function much more transparently and really do their best for families. But even so, the bottom line is they have to make sure enough income's coming in to keep the place afloat. So they're in a business to keep it in business because colleges are businesses. And we are trying to balance out the needs of our children and our assets and ability to pay and what's the right situation for them and all of those things. So they're very different perspectives and very different sets of goals. And remember that they're being paid to process students. They're certainly not being paid to make sure your student gets the most aid possible. There's nobody at the financial aid office who's going to be sitting there combing through the scholarships that they have from their alumni association or wherever. Oh, let's see, is there anything for this student? They have piles and piles and piles of students that they need to work through. You're the one who needs to be the advocate, or you need to get somebody like me on board with you. And a lot of times at the schools, they'll have like whiteboards or computer monitors kind of keeping track of what they're doing, and they're leveraging certain kinds of students versus other kinds of students because they're trying to attract whatever they're trying to attract to balance out their class in whatever way that their goal is. Like, for example, MIT is always looking for women, qualified women, to be engineers because it's a predominantly male university population. Just as an obvious example, but it could be that they're looking for, you just never know what facets. It could be extracurriculars, or it could be gender or race or state you're from or a million other things. So, and you just don't know kind of, are we the lucky ones that you're looking for some attribute that our child has? But there's often that leveraging going on because they've got to balance their pool of funds with your students. You can have your CPA help, but the financial aid forms are from the Department of Education and the tax forms are from the IRS. And they sometimes use the same words and they mean different things by them. And accountants are good at minimizing your tax bill, but not maximizing your aid. And sometimes their advice hurts your financial aid, and sometimes financial aid impacts your taxes. And so having your college helper, your college consultant work with your CPA and have them talk to each other is a good idea. But your CPA, a lot of them call people like me to get help with the FAFSA because they don't know. Should we do it ourselves? I initially gave this to a bunch of homeschoolers, and we're pretty independent. I understand that. I've been homeschooling for 17 years. And a lot of us are independent, even if we're not homeschooling. But there's an awful lot of research. The financial aid regulations are complicated, and they change constantly. As long as Congress keeps meeting, everything sort of changes a lot. And then there's admissions trends and the changing tests, like the SAT is about to make a major change, and the ACT makes gradual changes all the time. And you have to be really consistent and assertive, and failing to take charge is going to hurt you financially. But there's a trade-off with how much time do you have and how many kids are you juggling and what's going on in your greater family. How much time and attention can you give to this? And how much time and attention can your child give to this, knowing that your child is a teenager without a fully developed brain, they're still maturing, without any life experience and limited life skills. And so you have to look at what is possible realistically. And then the other thing that I've seen, even with the families with excellent relationships between the adults and the teens, is that certain things kids seem to take an outsider's perspective better. They will hear the direction, they will hear the guidance, they will hear the calls to accountability and to do better than they have been, sometimes better than they hear from the parents. Or sometimes that outsider validates what the parents have been saying, because that just something about those teenage years of kind of pushing back a little bit because they've got to become an adult in their own right. It makes it sometimes hard for them to hear us parents. And of course we can't redo this. So if we want to do it ourselves, we really need to think about it. But I have a way to partner with you that I think will be helpful. So we really do need help, and it's going to make an enormous difference in our lives and in our pocketbooks. So I want to take a look at what college consultants are, because we're professionals that work with families and help the kids through this process. And there's different kinds, and we provide different services, and we charge all sorts of different fees. So let's get into that. Okay, there are three main categories as I identified. There are admissions-focused consultants, and I'm listing some of the names here because some of them are rather fluid. Like I call myself a college planner or a college consultant, but I do both the admissions and financial aid because I'm a certified college planning specialist. But we all kind of call ourselves different things, even though we have titles. On the financial, you'll see a little bit more funding tends to be in the name. Some of them are registered investment advisors and things like that, where they're actually selling you financial products. So you just need to be careful, because when somebody's selling you a financial product, they may not be charging you for the consultation, but they're going to get a commission from whatever they sell you. Okay, and so sometimes, sorry to say, but sometimes people are advocating products because they have a quota to fill, or they get better commission from it, not necessarily that it's the best thing for their clients. The best financial planners will do the best for their clients no matter what, because they know in the long run that will benefit everyone the best, but not everybody uses best practice. You'll also see some people called college counselors, planning strategists. Overall, independent education consultants is us. Independent means we work for families, not for schools. We don't work for the colleges. We don't work for the high schools. We work for individual students and their families. So there are different credentials. There are programs at some of the UC schools that people go through to get trained. The certified education planner, they're actually for people that work at schools. So you have quite a spectrum of ways that people can be trained to do this, and they're going to mean different things. I've seen CPAs do this, and they have a specialty. I've seen chartered life underwriters, those are life insurance agents. I've seen just academics do this. So across the spectrum, but just to give you some idea that sometimes people only know admissions, sometimes people only really know funding, sometimes people know both. Nobody, I don't think, is an expert on everything. It's just too expansive a field. I do want to mention NACFA in particular, the National Association of College Funding Advisors, because in their information and on their website, they look like college funding advisors, but they're life insurance agents. So life insurance can be a great way to save money for college. It has a number of great advantages, and I recommend it often for families with young children, but I'm not a life insurance agent. So I'll look at your situation and assess it and evaluate it and make recommendations based on what I see is best for you. And I'll send you to somebody I know, or I'll just say, go look for somebody that says what you're looking for. I'm not making any money on that, so it's pure advice. But when you have people calling themselves college funding advisors and they're really selling life insurance, that's not the most forthright manner of doing business. That's not best practice. I'll just put it that way. Then you also have college recruiters. We see this more internationally, but they're paid by colleges and universities to bring students to that college and university. Okay, and those of us who belong to the Higher Education Consultants Association, HECA, or IECA, or NCAG, we all promise when we join as a part, kind of an oath of a promise of ethical practice that we will not take incentives from colleges and universities, and we don't. And some of us will visit schools a lot and will get friendly. Some of us keep it a little bit more distant. It's important that we know different campuses so that we can help our students, but it's also important that we have an objective perspective, and we're not too closely aligned, and we certainly cannot affect admissions or financial aid decisions at all. So, but I just want to let you know who's there. Okay, and then we also have sole practitioners versus companies. Some sole practitioners work in groups, so that can be a little bit confusing. But basically, for example, I'm a sole practitioner, so if you work with me, you work with me. You're not going to hear from 16 other people, versus a company where somebody's going to do test prep, and somebody else is going to help with college selection, and somebody else is going to help with the resume, somebody else is going to go over your taxes with you, somebody else is going to maybe go over your assets with you, or financial aid, and so no one person there is going to know your whole picture. And certainly nobody at those, and any of the ones I have any familiarity with, is going to look at the picture beyond that one student. Where I, especially coming out of the homeschooling world, being aware of large families, when I look at a family situation, I'm very aware that, okay, we have 3 kids that are already through, we have 3 kids still coming, we have 6 kids on the way, whatever the situation is, and where the overlap years are, and all those different things. It gets complex. But that's one of the things that I do. So when I'm speaking to a family, I'm speaking to them in context of their whole family with a focus on a particular student. Some of my peers, I'm trying to think if any of my peers talk about doing that. I really haven't heard it. Most people in this field are on the admissions side, and they just help you with the applications, and some a little bit with the college selection, which is vastly different from what I do. Okay, some of the academic services that college consultants offer: career guidance. As I mentioned before, with the 6-year to bachelor's degree problem that we have, having some idea and somebody work with us during the high school years to figure out what we want to do and start to validate that and help us to know ourselves better, I think is critical. Not very many of my peers will offer that. A lot of times career guidance people are for adults changing careers, but there's really a gap here in what's going on at the high school level. Course selection guidance, because, for example, the AP Stats versus AP Calculus. People say to me all the time, which one should my student take? Well, it depends on what they want to do in college. Totally depends on what's required in college. Some majors require both. Some could care less about one or the other of them. So you need to know. Everything is reverse engineered. Learning modalities. I have some colleagues that specialize in working with Asperger's kids or specialize with ADHD kids and different dyslexics and students with different challenges. And it's important that you have those addressed and you have a good idea of what's going on campus so that the services your student needs to be successful are in place. Especially people with things like Asperger's, because like dyslexics, they don't have a problem in a dorm, where Asperger's have problems in the classroom sometimes and in the dormitories, so they need to really have the right situation for them, depending on where they're at on the Asperger's spectrum. Leadership development, study skill development, those are skills and qualities that the colleges are looking for. So some of us offer that and some don't. Extracurricular activity guidance, especially during the summers, but depending, especially when you're top tier and elite schools, excuse me, having the right extracurriculars and things to put together a coherent resume to go along with that transcript is an enormous piece of the application. Test selection and scheduling guidance, which tests to take, how many of them, when, how often, all of that. Test prep guidance, how do we do test prep? Some of us also do provide test prep, some of us do not, but we all know of test prep companies and tutors and online courses and all sorts of ways to do it and can give advice based on that particular student. College selection guidance, I think it's hugely important. You got to have the right fit because you don't want your student changing in a couple of years because they absolutely hate it there, and you need to have the money work as well. So there's a lot to that piece. I think it's the most critical piece in a lot of ways. And then application preparation guidance, most of us will do that. But I just wanted to go over that so you have some idea of what's possible, what kind of help is possible out there. On the funding side, financial aid eligibility maximization, and you want to start on this early because the way financial aid works is that the calendar year before the school year starts is the one that's looked at for financial aid eligibility, at least at this point. And so, for example, if your student is going to graduate high school in 2017 and start college in 2017, 2016 is their base year. So that means if you have anything you want to adjust that might trigger a tax event and leave some evidence that it exists, you're going to want to do that in 2015. Okay? And so our students graduating in 2017, so 16, 17 is senior year, 15, 16 is junior year, 14, 15 is sophomore year. So somewhere end of sophomore year, beginning of junior year is the latest that you want to get that advice because you only have a few more months after that junior year starts in order to make those changes so that they don't show up in the tax returns that the colleges are going to see for 2017. So starting early makes a difference as well. College funding strategies. There's different ways to do this, including some people have generous grandparents and other relatives. There's ways that will just drive a truck right through the middle of your financial aid package and other ways where it won't have any impact at all. So having all that strategies and advice available is going to be key. Investment advice. Are we saving for retirement? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? Timing of different things. What are the different ROIs or return on investment for different funding devices and products and ways to do this? That can be critical as well. And then, of course, scholarship advice and guidance. And I talked a little bit about the kinds of scholarships. We've got the ones that come from the schools and the ones that come privately. We've got merit-based and need-based and all of that. So sorting out, do we look for private scholarships or not? And how do we set our student up so that they're going to be eligible for some scholarships at some of their schools, if that makes sense as part of our suite of ways to fund. So we give advice on all of that too. There are specialists as well. So some people will specialize in athletes, NCAA and NAIA athletes, and getting to the coaches and getting film to the coaches of the students performing or stats or that kind of thing, especially if you're going to go out of region. Artists, dealing with portfolios and getting all that prepared. Catholics or other people with religious views that really want to protect those and have some special needs in that area. There are some of us who specialize with that. International students, there are whole companies. One of my kinsmen, there's another O'Brien who's out in China working with Chinese students who come to school in America. I work with outside the country centers. So you'll have all kinds of specialists on that. Ivy League, some people are targeted all to the Ivy League, and most of them are in New England. Learning differences that I mentioned before. Pre-professional, because there are certain things you need to put in place undergraduate in order to line things up properly to do graduate school. If that's med school, if that's getting a PhD, if it's veterinary school, or any other, being a physical therapist or anything else, it's going to require something beyond the bachelor's. Theater, dealing with that, or music, same, because they need to deal with auditions and different kinds of portfolios, and depending if they're composing or they're performing, and that can get quite complex in the schedules and where to go, and national portfolio days and national audition days and all kinds of things like that. And strategically placing those, depending on where the schools are and where you are and all of that. It's a whole separate application on top of the regular application. And then transfer students. There's a few people that specialize in that. It's very detailed work. Every community college relates to various colleges and universities in different ways, and every university college 4-year reviews the community college courses and will accept them in different ways. And sometimes different departments or colleges at the same university will accept the community college or the state college that you went to while you're in high school, their courses differently. So it can be very complex, and painstaking work is needed in that area. Okay, and then let's get into pricing, because it's always nice to have some idea of what's reasonable, what is happening out there, because it's the thing that nobody talks about, but I think that's not fair to parents. I really like to have informed parents. So a la carte, when you just order specific services, can be anything from $75 to $300 an hour. And then by service, I've seen $50 services, and I've seen $20,000 services. Obviously, huge difference in range and scope. So a lot of my colleagues offer service bundles. So they'll do, for example, 10 hours of consulting for $2,000, or 5 hours of essay coaching and editing for $500, and they'll just sell them in bundles. You'll see packages, and they are all over the place, really depending on the scope of services and the expertise of the provider, as well as the time frame, because obviously if you're doing a rush at the end, the time frame is going to be tighter, and so you're going to pay more for that. Programs up to $14,000 for a 1-week application prep program. I've seen this year in and year out. There's a firm or two that offers these. They are Ivy focused, and they're insanely expensive. And then courses vary widely in scope and price. I haven't seen very many. There are a few. I offer one set of courses, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I haven't seen very many being offered, because it's mostly done one-on-one consulting. And as you've been able to hear me talk throughout the webinar, there's a lot of special factors that are going to be different, one family or even one child in a family to another. And so it's hard to do courses. So a lot of people just don't even think about doing it. Pricing. One more thing, most offer a discount for twins and siblings. And many of us offer lower rates when you start earlier, because it spreads the work out. And you're going to work with us for a longer time, but you're going to get better results. But we kind of give you an incentive to work early, but also acknowledging that you are willing to do that. So we give a little lower rate. So let me talk just a minute about what I have to offer. This video, unfortunately, is not working. This is one of my students who graduated this year in 2015. She's going off to Creighton University in Nebraska. And she talked in her video, and I'm really sorry it won't play, but it just won't play today, about how I introduced her to colleges that she had not heard of before. And in fact, the one that she's chosen to go to is not one that was originally on her list. And what I really liked, and the reason I selected it to put it on here, and I will definitely get through the technical issues to get it to play, and she talked at the end about getting to know herself better because she'd worked with me. And I was so thrilled at that, because that's one of my big goals. But to have a student spontaneously say that was just thrilling, because that is a big piece of it, of them getting to know themselves. And additionally, in her particular case, she lost one of her parents during her senior year. And so that was a huge impact on how everything flowed, and whether or not she was even going to go to school next year, and all of that. So there were a lot of issues there. And it happened during the middle of application season. And so you know, after the funeral, it kind of helped her keep going. Just a recap, in case you missed it at the beginning, of who I am. I've been homeschooling for 17 years. I have 6 kids from 10 to 21. I have 4 boys and 2 girls. I've been a professional college planner since 2004 and earned the certification of being a college planning specialist in 2009. As I said, I've studied engineering and theology, and I have happy clients in many, many places. My seniors this year, as I mentioned, were offered over $250,000 each in merit scholarships on average. And last year it was over $133,000. And I know it was a lot over that because as this year's students reported in, I was seeing gaps in what was reported last year. So I know they had a lot more. But definitely have had some good results on the financial side. And with Facebook, I have been able to keep in touch with my students over the last number of years, and I'm seeing them graduate in 4. I'm seeing all the groundwork that we laid in high school really pay off and work, and so that's been really, really exciting. So I have 3 options for ways to work with me at this point in time. I have my premier one-on-one student prep services, and I walk month in and month out through the whole high school time, doing the career searches and the college selections and campus visits and figuring out when to do the tests and how to prepare the applications and create a resume and do the financial aid applications, all the way through to the final college selection in the senior year, and they know where to go. So I would suggest that if you're interested in that, you go to my website, because there's actually a place on there to start to schedule an initial consultation. And my fees range from $250 to $650 a month. And I only take a few students per class because it's a lot of work. It's very high level and it's very personalized, and it's high caliber, and I want everyone to have an adequate amount of time so that they can have all of their needs met. Secondly, I have online courses. I have 3 of them that I've put together to partner with families to walk through the process. My foundation course is meant to be done ideally both freshman and sophomore year. Worst case, just do it sophomore year. And it's focused on career and college search. The junior course is focused on the college search, refining that, and testing. Because by the end of sophomore year, the goal is to have a list of between 20 and 50 schools. 20 to 30 is really better. And so we know what tests to take junior year. And then junior year, we continue to refine career search, major selection, and programs and the various colleges, so that by the end of junior year, we've got all our testing done and we have our finalized school list. And then we plow right in the summer into the senior course, which is focused on application preparation. And that's both admissions application and financial aid application, because the application season opens July 1st when the Universal College app opens. On August 1st, the Common App opens and a lot of other applications open, and we're off to the races. First deadlines are in October, believe it or not. So there's a lot that needs to be done and can be done over the summer, and even get seeded through the junior year to prepare for it, so that we get as much of it done before school even starts with those really hefty senior classes. Because there's still a lot to do with transcripts and test scores and recommendations and all of that. And the courses are $696 each, which are year-long courses. Compared to what my private clients pay, this is a major steal. And the way that I have them recorded. You have a year's access. So if you need to go through one over and over and over, or the student watches it and said, hey, Mom and Dad, I really need you to watch it, or vice versa, or we watched it separately, let's watch it together, let's make sure we got it all, because some of them have quite detailed instructions of what to do, and you may need to listen to it several times. It's there. And then with each course comes what I call the College Prep Toolkit. And in the toolkit is a guide on how to write an achievements resume. There's a guide on how to do campus visits, so how to set those up ahead of time, what kinds of questions to ask the various people on campus, and which kinds of people to talk to, and a place to record those, so that you don't visit 2 or 3 schools over a week and come back and go, gee, the lady with the pink shirt, was she at that school or the other school? Or, yeah, I really like the architecture of that place, the ivy up the buildings, it was really cool. Or and you end up really getting everything in a big mishmash. So walking through that, how to write your ACT and SAT essays, how to write your application essays, how to do the whole college selection. So I have, in addition to the video courses, I also have the books explaining and giving examples of this is how you do this. you know. And for the essays, for example, they include sample essays at the various scores. So not only do you have a table of, you know, to get this score on the essay, it's, you have to do these things. You also can see samples, which is, I think, very helpful, because it's one thing to have a checklist, another thing to really read it and go, oh, I see the difference between a 4 and a 5. Yeah, okay, I could tweak what I'm doing and get a better score, that kind of thing. And then if you want to get these, also on my website, Celtic College Consultants, under services are my online courses, and you can access that directly there. And then the third option, as I mentioned, number 3, you can create your own one-on-one package or hire me hourly. And any combination of my services can be selected. You'd start this the same way the consulting clients would start, which is to go to my website and ask for a consultation. And in that consultation, we'll talk about, you know, where's your student at? What's been done so far financially and academically? Where's the student at? I always talk to the student. And then what are you looking for? What are your main questions? Get those answered. And what help do you need? And then what's the best way that I can help you with that? If it's the online courses, or if it's the one-on-one consulting, or if we want to just do piecemeal, you want this and you want that at these different times, we can get that all set up for you at that time. So as I said, getting started, oops, there was special conference pricing at the conference, but we're not at the conference anymore, sorry. So there occasionally is special pricing, but today there is not. And then you would start with a consultation or just ordering the classes. And once you order the classes, you will automatically get sent your login information, and you can get started right away. Or you can shoot me an email and say, I want to do the online classes, but I don't want them to start till whatever month you want them to start in. But I will say for seniors, you definitely want to start in June, July at the latest, between junior year and senior year. If you're starting later, you're starting later. You have access to all of the videos, so you can catch up. You don't have to wait a month in between. I do send an email saying, you know, here's what's going on this month and it's time to watch your video, but you can just plow through them quickly if that's what you need to do to get caught up. So that's all available. I want to thank you for your time. I'm sorry that I'm not able to take questions at this time, and we did go just a couple minutes over, but thank you very much. And I'll be sending you a link to the recording if you want to share that with friends or watch it again or share it with the rest of your family. That would be fine. Thank you very much and have a great day.